welcome you to the 2:20 to 3:05. So I better take off my watch and be a good moderate myself here. The session on best practices in rubrics and assessment tools for beginning classes. I've really listened with a lot of interest to those of you in the sessions that I've been in, and I know that a lot of you are struggling with the issues of standardization and rubrics and assessment and tuning and all these big and scary words. And let me tell you, coming from an assessment queen, as I'm regarded at my university, for a variety of reasons. I hope this comes up. Assessment isn't anything to worry about. For those of you who are worried about assessment, it's not going to come up. But what I have is an assessment rubric that's being used in the high schools. And this is, you know, I come from, my grandfather was a circuit preacher. I come from a proselytizing family, not religiously, but educationally. And this is a rubric that is being used, and I'll make you crook your necks to read it, but I'll unplug it. Used to assess high school students under the Common Core, which has been implemented in California already. So the rubric asks, and this is part of the literacy education element of the Common Core in the Long Beach Unified School District. The assessment rubric asks students on a scale of 1 to 4 to identify the author and the source document. They're given essentially a number of sources that they have to analyze and then write an argumentative set of paragraphs about those sources afterwards. They have to accurately identify the author, the type of source, date and location of creation, and effectively use this information to assess point of view, reliability, and tone of the document. That's for it's the top score. The bottom score does not identify any aspect of the author or source accurately. The next one moves on to content. The top one makes many clear factual observations about content of the document, effectively identifies the main idea. That's the top score. I won't even read you the bottom because it's basically a flat line along the bottom. Historical context. Makes many relevant references to historical context. Connects this information to the document content in a meaningful way. Audience and purpose. Makes persuasive inference about the purpose and audience of the document using evidence from content or historical context. Clearly explains how this shapes the content of the document. And then the last one, synthesis and interpretation. Makes a coherent argument using many specific references to document evidence. Those are the documents that are provided to them. Corroborates evidence when possible. Okay, if we're not doing this in the colleges, we're going to get these students who can do this. What grades? 8 through 12. And it's also it's scalable, and it's being scaled down now to 5th grade in our district, and will be scaled down through 1st and 2nd grade. So these are the sort of the 5 historical thinking skills that we are assessing high school students' ability to do through teacher professional development. Meaning that we are the institution that trains those teachers that will have to go out into the classroom and do this. And so what I thought I'd like to do here for this session is not for me to talk, because I know a lot about assessment, I know a lot about structured programs and other kinds of things, including beginning classes, but just start talking about goals. You know, do we have some goals we want to set as tuners for introductory classes? What kinds of introductory classes? At what level does introductory mean at different types of institutions? And is it even possible to set goals that are common across institutions and vertically throughout the different levels? Okay?
Before we do that, can you just repeat what the 5 historical thinking skills are that the
Sure.
high school is expecting?
Yeah, and this is actually, I think Dan probably knows this. This is going to be used throughout California, so this is not just one high school.
Right.
This is probably going to be incorporated into the Smarter Balance Assessment Consortium activity. So for those states, and there are many states that have adopted SBAC, as we call it, I don't know why they call it Smart Balance. It's like a learning platform called Desire to Learn. I mean, come on, if you're in college, right, you have no desire to learn. It's business, right? So this is going to be widely adopted, and so I think we really do need to prepare for it. One is author and source. That's basically identifying and using that information to assess point of view, reliability, and tone of the document. Content makes clear factual observation about the content of the document. So those are very clearly reading skills, critical thinking and reading skills that we're asking them to do. Effectively identifies the main idea. Historical context. And I'm happy to share this.
Is it on the website somewhere?
No, actually, but I can post it on the website. This is actually from an Improving Teacher Quality grant that we run out of Long Beach State.
It would be helpful.
Okay, but I'd be happy to do that. Historical context and audience and purpose. And I actually have, I don't have them with me, but I could post a couple of sample answers. We do pre and post tests. So we do pre-test to assess teacher effectiveness at the beginning and post-test and compare them at the end to select classes throughout socioeconomic classes and types of high schools. Some of our high schools are 5,000 students, some are 700. Okay. So, but if we could talk about some goals, I think that would be important, because I think sort of what I've heard from a lot of tuners is we aren't getting a good sense of what we're really supposed to be doing.
Is an assumption you're making that we have to, in thinking about goals at the college first year level, we need to think about new skills, or we need to reinforce these skills? It seems to me that there's a tension there. We can keep adding on to the list.
Oh, sure. Oh, sure.
Would we be better served thinking in terms of taking this as a core group and going deeper into this and reinforcing, so students coming through our courses are going to hear the same language expressed in the same way and reinforce this?
Sure.
And I'm not saying one is better than the other, but I think that's a question we ought to throw around and talk about.
No, I think it's a very valid question.
But one of the problems, though, is even if this is being assessed at the high school level, doesn't necessarily mean that students are actually acquiring these skills at the high school level. It just means that they're measuring whether or not students have acquired these skills at the high school level. It's aspirational. I've read the state standards for my state, and if my students came in having met those standards and achieved those things, I'd be teaching very, very differently than I do.
Mm-hmm. No, but I think you're correct, but I do suspect that if, and this is a big if, the Common Core and the changes in the way teaching is approached and learning is reinforced, the change from mastery of content to skill development will result in a different type of student than we've seen now.
It should over time.
It should over time. It's not going to happen immediately.
I absolutely agree.
Long after I retire. Yeah.
This may get some of the tensions in the whole project, I'm not sure, but in a way I hope it does. But my department, what I've been able to convince them into is introducing in a first year course the different faculty of the department, different ways in which history can be understood. So there's world history, there's gender history, there's military history. And so this sort of content, the thematic introduction, I have no idea how this can be translated into a rubric or assessment. It's something we want to do where students will be addressing faculty, becoming more personable, embedding them into the culture of the department more. This is a major goal of what we plan for our new first year course, and I'm just wondering if anyone has done anything like this, or how we would begin to assess that. I have no idea.
Any other questions? About goals to work on? Yeah.
Liz Lightfeld, Cleveland State University. I think it depends too on who these courses are for. I mean, this goes back to an earlier session on general education, because we require at least one survey sequence of our majors, so like both halves of Western Civ or the US survey. But most, I mean, 90% of the students coming through our survey courses are non-majors.
Sure.
Who are there for some other reason, fulfilling some other requirement. And so what I've begun thinking more and more about is that we need to find allies in other parts of the Gen Ed program and talk about similar skills. As I'm going to a meeting a week from now where we're going to talk, the provost has said, oh, I'm going to spend $300,000 on improving student writing. Okay, great. And he's tasked my dean with doing it, and I had put together a proposal for improving writing in the history surveys. So I've gotten roped into this meeting, but mine is very discipline specific. As I've begun to talk to colleagues who are going to be at that meeting, they're like, well, we require a lot of writing, but our colleagues in poli-sci or sociology don't necessarily. And so how do we all get ourselves on the same page so that we're cultivating a similar skill set that I think will benefit our majors? But since my introductory level courses only serve a sort of small number of majors, I have to think about it a little bit more broadly too.
But on the flip side of that, the other side of the coin, of course, is that what you're doing in the introductory courses will actually benefit a larger number of students overall.
Yes, I hope so. But only if it's reinforced in other disciplines, because the pushback we get from students is, well, I don't have to do this in my other classes. Why are you making me write take-home, essays for my exams and stuff like that?
But the flip side of that, I don't know if your institution, but at many, ours included, that's where we draw our majors from. Very few students come to college to major in history.
Right.
So if we're doing this well, and they're seeing it not replicated in other departments, we find that we get a lot of students switching out of business, switching out of STEM programs, and not because they think we're easy, but because they think we have a skill that they can run with when they finish. So, and I think it's in the Gen Ed courses that we do, in world history and the other pieces, we have US survey as well, we've got some basic expectations in writing that they can write benefit all students, but they also help us. They're seeing our faculty teaching, the same faculty that we take major courses from, and they're seeing what they do well. So I think that's a more positive spin on why we should do it. Maybe the others will catch on and start, the sociologists and political scientists will start requiring more writing because they see the benefits of it.
Yeah.
I also think that it can be the basis for having a conversation about different types of writing and the functions of different types of writing across the university. Because actually the academic essay is a very specialized kind of writing. And we're trying to educate students collectively. I mean, I know we're history, but we're also institutions. We're trying to educate students collectively for the world out there where they'll have to do lots of different kinds of writing, and the types that we prize may not actually be the most important. For instance, we sort of fetishize original research, but when students do writing out in the working world, they're probably not going to be doing a lot of original research. They'll be doing research, but but applied research, you know, we have this problem, where is the research purpose of the problem? They're not going to be choosing their own subject. It may well be given to them. And so maybe that's a way to talk about it and work with it, as, you know, here within these different disciplines or these different kinds of writing, and so that the students are told, well, part of your thinking as a student should be, what kind of writing does this discipline require? What kinds of tools do I need to use for this particular kind of writing? And that's a toolkit they can apply in all kinds of writing. You know, that set of
Let me ask you this. I think there's sort of 2 or 3 different conversations going on right now. And the first thing I want to sort of pull back to is the first question, your first question, John. And that is, what is an introductory course in history? Right? Is it a content course? Is it a critical thinking course? Is it an introduction to the profession? Right? And the kinds of things that, say, a department's faculty do? Is it all of those, or does it mean different things on different campuses at different levels? And so I think that's something we really need to be mindful of when we talk about this, right? Is what, for all of you, I mean, how many of you teach an introductory level history course? Okay, so we all do. Great. I was hoping that was the case. And how many of you have senior faculty in your department who say, oh, I haven't taught an introductory course since, you know, I came here. I can't possibly do that. A few of you? I do. Okay. And, you know, it's not true. If you have a PhD in history, say in American history, guess what? You can teach the survey. Okay? So I think we need to think about that, and we need to think very intentionally about, you know, how we define an introductory course and the goals of that introductory course, and to sort of give you, you know, a shameless plug. This book, Understanding by Design, is like the Bible. It's a great nuts and bolts how-to introduction to figuring out what you want your students to know and what you want them to be able to do when they exit a course or a program. Okay. Understanding by Design.
Is there an author to that?
Wiggins and McTighe. It's a second edition, and they have an associated website. It's widely used in K through 12 education. It's not widely used in higher ed. Okay, unfortunately. And it's very helpful. It just sort of helps you sort of step back and say, what do we want our students to know? So there's that issue. And then beyond what kinds of introductory courses, or what is an introductory course? What are the elements of an introductory course, right? What will help students develop those skills and that set of knowledge and those competencies once they exit your course? Okay, so anybody have some examples they could share? Sure.
I would suggest that we've got rid of doing the survey as the first course that they take. Because we found that it's too broad, it goes too fast, it's too thin. And we really want our students to develop some of the basic skills and techniques of history, so we create a special time, one time and a place. And we focus on that, so we give them anchors.
Okay.
When they get to the survey, at least they have a couple of touch points that at least they've done some work on, and they also have some of the skills that they practiced with a specific area.
So is that like a freshman's first year seminar?
Yep.
We do exactly that. We instituted this 2 years ago where we got rid of the surveys. And I understand one of the reasons why we did it, we found that most of our students felt like they had taken the survey 3 or 4 times, even though they really hadn't. And so we spent the first month trying to convince them that this is actually a new class, and we lost all that time. So teaching them the history of the car at least allows them to kind of make that kind of cognitive move to say this is different, and allows us to come back to the surveys again. We've had good success with this too, so I'm a fan of this model.
Right. And you?
Yeah, I echo the same thing.
Right. Okay. Yeah? In fact?
Just to be devil's advocate, these sound like very, very exciting courses and an interesting approach. But if you're teaching in a community college and there's maybe like 1 or 2 history requirements, the pull to do the survey is around the fact that you've got maybe 3 credits or 6 credits to devote to a history requirement. And then there's the sense of approaching the history survey like a sausage and saying, okay, so I want it to spend all this time, I want it to teach these historical thinking skills, I want it to get all this sort of work done in terms of what there is in my field, because they may never take a history course again. And I'm just wondering if anybody agonizes about this at all.
Yeah, do people agonize? Let me, go ahead.
I think this is somewhat related. I'm at Willamette University, and we also use this smaller first-year seminar, but recently we've had a lot of pressure we capped out at 18, and we've got pressure to offer larger courses these days. And so we're back to the survey model. To me, maybe the compromise solution here is you constrain the time frame. You know, that why does it have to be from the dawn of time until 2000, right? So
because that's what the state says it does.
That may be, in some states, yeah. There are other hands. Dan?
There's one other issue I'm concerned about, and I'd just like to hear how people respond to this. Another function for the survey, at least at our institution, is for the preparation of elementary and secondary teachers. And they have to get through a praxis exam, which is going to be focused on content in the U.S. West world. If we don't offer that course, I think they lose out.
Is this, let me ask you this for a point of clarification. Does Utah require the praxis exam?
Yes.
So there's no way that they can do a waiver program?
No.
Lendl, you had your hand up.
Yeah, we still have surveys at Augustana College. We reoriented towards uncovering, not themes, Jonathan, but basic practices and dispositions of our discipline that would be appropriate for people who are going to be citizens, not future graduate students of history. And we find on the praxis test a slight improvement in our education major scores. So even though we don't race through the survey like we used to, they're still doing okay. They're thinking better than I did as a senior history major. And the idea I want to throw out is in the literature that's out there on how to teach the lower level survey courses, there's a consensus among those who are writing about this that that's how to do the lower level course. Away from coverage towards uncoverage. We all agree on that, at least the ones who are writing about this. But we don't agree on what those practices and dispositions are that you should be focusing on in the course.
Right.
You can't do 20. So, you know, each of us is suggesting 5 to 7 that would be appropriate. But they're not the same 5 to 7. And I'm wondering if the tuning project is a place to thrash this out and see if some consensus is possible.
Right. Which was sort of where I was trying to steer this discussion. I know Gladys wanted to kick in. We don't have a lot of time left.
I just wanted to say that by using that uncoverage method and not emphasizing content, but it's there, students pick up more content than when it was just content. And I'm amazed at the things that they can recall and use. So I think it's very effective for content.
Right, and in some senses, if you look at, go back to those sort of 5 historical thinking skills, if you have a project, inquiry-based assignment in an introductory level class, whether it's an individual or a group assignment, context matters, right? Their project won't make any sense otherwise. And so I think that this is important to remember as well, is that they have to develop that, at least some level of competency in the content to be able to situate their study and articulate why it matters. And I'm wondering, does anybody else use reflective essays in an introductory course at the end of the course? Can you tell me a little bit about your experiences with that?
Oh, I don't just use it at the end. I use it at several points just to help
help students be able to articulate what they've learned so far and sort of synthesize.
And that's a form of assessment, right?
That's what I hope is going to go into the portfolio that is really reflective of the, we have a very clumsy version right now. I'm trying to figure out a more useful one for the student.
In the back there, somebody was in a, oh yeah.
I did. I mean, they're very short essays, just a couple of paragraphs, but I have them assigned. They're actually kind of the bulk of the writing because the survey is so big. I've given up assigning a formal essay, but I have them do those writing assignments, and they're cumulative, so they keep on I force them to kind of keep going back over previous material and talk about their own engagement with the material. And they seem to like it because they think that they're getting away from a more onerous exercise, and I like it because they're really engaging with things. It seems to play well.
This is perhaps an example of the error part of trial and error and all of this. but at the end of the last term, I gave them the actual learning, our shared learning objectives for World Civ, and I asked them if they thought they had achieved them, and the course had achieved them. And so, of course, they all said, yeah, I achieved all of these things. So,
yeah, they do.
It wasn't quite the useful exercise. They did feel like, yes, I'm tweaking that in a way that...
Yeah, in the back?
Yeah, I moved away from having my students do a research paper in the survey class because I was just tired of reading really crappy research papers because they don't have enough time to really do it very well in terms of producing knowledge. But what I still have them do a research as part of a larger project, and they all kind of contribute to it. When I switched to having them do, instead of the paper, I have them do a research summary of where they got their sources, how they used them, what they discarded, why. And these could be 3 to 5 pages. And they're self-assessments essentially of their research. And then I started looking at those compared to even some advanced level student self-assessments, and they're really good. Because they're open-ended and in a way the students can really share. So that is a form of assessment, even though I don't call it that, but I get a lot of rich data from that.
Sure. So then how do we take the data that are in those student assessments, like reflective essays, or like your assignment, and turn it into useful assessments at the institutional level? Which I think is a big question. Yeah.
Well, this is not actually an answer
Okay.
to that question.
It's
Sorry.
probably an unanswerable question.
But I just wondered if we could just go back for 1 second to the question of can we identify the goals that we're trying to get at in the 100 level classes? Because I feel like we skipped away from that.
Yeah, we did a bit.
But I thought that one of the things that really came out of value when we met in June was this idea of empathy. That even at the 100 level, one of the goals, the critical reading, critical writing, being able to analyze a document, all that. That I think is pretty self-evident, but I thought the fact that it seemed like all the groups came back with this idea that also empathy ought to be something that we are listing as a goal and we're learning how to evaluate that.
Right. And certainly empathy is something that leads to critical thinking, right? To being able to place yourself in historical actors' footsteps, if you will. That it develops those kinds of critical thinking and critical reasoning skills that we look for.
Just a note on that I read about research that if you start a class section with a story in that vein, conditions the students to think more like that, which struck me as a very simple and very, if it indeed works, I have not tried it out, effective way of getting to that.
Could we see that? What's the beginning? Sorry, we can't hear it.
I read that if you start a class section with a story that evokes empathy, that it does get the students into a mode of thinking that you may want to land up in, but you give them a lead that they are unaware is a lead. So it is a really capitalizing on what our colleagues in other fields are finding out about how people learn and how people are receptive to information that you give.
Right.
I thought it was an interesting.
As an example, for instance, not to break you off, but I was fortunate to begin teaching the survey this spring semester. Django Unchained just came out. Most of my students had seen it, I asked, and I took a risk thinking most of them had seen it. And then I brought in the Jordan Anderson letter and asked them to put themselves in Jordan Anderson's, for those of you who don't know it, it's widely available on the web, to put themselves in Jordan Anderson's footsteps, you know, and analyze the letter. This is I'm working with a relatively about 50 students in my introductory course, so it's a relatively small group of students. And then I set them loose, and they're only doing projects. I'm not lecturing at all. I make no pretensions to content coverage, full content coverage, except that I'm using a textbook and incorporating online timed tests, quizzes, which only account for about 20% of their grade. But they know that to be able to do their projects, they have to keep up with the reading.
Just to bring it back to assessment for just a second.
Yeah, sure.
I grew up in a world where I kept baseball statistics from the time I was a tiny child. I keep in my grade book, here are the goals that the course is supposed to accomplish at whatever level. On this assignment, students did it, understood it, or didn't. And then I submit that data to our assessment office. That is a part of the information. Now, it's subjective to be sure because I'm doing it as the instructor, but it gives them more information about you know, what particulars in content, what can they read critically, can they identify a thesis, et cetera, et cetera. And I've got those for each assignment, and it doesn't take any longer to keep score.
No, it doesn't.
And then it's simply scanning that document and sending it to the assessment office.
Well, let me ask you this, though. For those of you who teach in institutions where the introductory course will have more than one section, are there clearly articulated student learning, no, I'm hearing a lot of no's, clearly articulated student learning outcomes that are incorporated into every syllabus? Most students?
Yes and no.
Yes and no.
Yes.
Why not? Because that seems to be where, to some extent, where assessment really needs to start.
I'll tell you why not in my case. Historically speaking, the survey courses, like everything else, were treated as an academic freedom issue. The syllabi were treated as independent. Faculty were assumed to be doing their job and handling it. Over time, student learning outcomes for general education courses have been mandated, and the syllabus has been mandated to include reference to the student learning outcomes that we are involved with, but we're not actually in any way evaluated to the extent that we actually meet those outcomes. Additionally, we are at the moment in the process of developing statewide student learning outcomes, over which we will have no control whatsoever, but on which we are almost certain to be assessed or evaluated in some unpleasant form.
Yeah?
No, I think we've been productive. We have new liberal ed learning outcomes, and we just went through a mapping exercise where we mapped our surveys. And we sat as faculty teaching a particular survey and came up with course outcomes generic enough that we could all collect data, but not exactly the same. And it was much easier for our world history faculty than it was for our Americanists, because we cooperate better, and most of us are, well, I'm old, but the rest of them are young. And so some of this, I think, is just generational. That has to retire.
I do think that's the case in some, in the back.
Is there a belief that among some that if you have to have the same learning outcomes, you have to have the same assessments? Is that where some of this is?
I'm wondering if that's the case.
That's unquestionably part of it, yeah.
Okay. So, essentially what you're saying is that there are sort of state level, State Board of Education requirements that are going to mitigate against academic freedom, the way that you're allowed to teach the survey, for instance, in the future.
It's certainly looking that way, yes.
Can you game the system?
That's why a process like this is important. I volunteered to serve on the committee that my state had to write these outcomes. So the outcomes were very broad. Create an argument using historical evidence. Analyze primary and secondary sources. We have to get involved in shaping this. It's not going away. If you're under SACS, you have to have student learning outcomes embedded in your syllabus. For the rest of you, I'm sure that's coming the next round. Now SACS wants colleges to report, faculty to report how they're using the results of their student learning outcomes to increase their class.
That's true for WASC as well.
So if you don't have them embedded in your syllabus now, I suggest you really get on this now, or someone's going to do it for you, which is what we all fear. So that's why I'd like to see the screening process have some recommendations about these surveys.
Right, and that's, I just want to sort of, before I get to you, I want to reinforce the idea that we're, as professionals, wherever possible, I know it's a real issue for, for time, but volunteer. I've written state standards as well. Volunteer to serve on your state stand. If it's not your state board of education, maybe it's certainly it's within the discipline. Maybe it's your teacher credentialing board or other kinds of areas where you can have real influence. Because too often, I was the editor of history teacher for a very long time, and too often the forces that drive this have been, at least in the past, the people in the schools of ed. Right? And this is why disciplinary knowledge and understanding is so important as we move forward. Yeah.
As far as a strategy, we decided a while back that if we took a few common goals, and I emphasize few, because if you're assessing them, it's easier to do. You can game the system, and you get your faculty to buy in that these are the ones we're going to use. We have them on our department website. Every faculty member on the syllabus just links to the website, so that it's not, I've got to write these down, I've got to do anything other than be aware that my students are going to be assessed on them. If I'm not focusing on them, it's going to show up.
Right.
And it's been a very simple transition, and we've actually had better experience with the senior faculty and we've hired a lot of juniors, and it's a matter of acculturating them into this newer system. And it works, but it's the key, I think, is to make it as non-intrusive on faculty who are reluctant to do this as you possibly can.
Yeah, okay, so sort of summing up, what we're really looking for, I think, from the tuning project is we're looking for perhaps a discussion of what an introductory course is. What are the elements of an introductory course? What are the limitations on faculty who design introductory courses, for instance, at the state level, as well as how do we assess that? We did talk a bit about student assessment, right? We haven't really talked very much about rubrics. And I think that's an important issue. I'll certainly post this rubric. And how many of you do use rubrics in your introductory courses? Most of you. Could I ask that we share those? Are these at least to the locked site, to the gated site? Because I think it would be helpful, especially as we go back to our institutions and talk about what works, and perhaps as an exercise, and I certainly will do this, to perhaps comment on the strengths and the weaknesses in our assessment rubrics, right? Because assessment rubrics do need to be revised as we develop more data, okay? So I think we've identified a few goals. We have to move on to our next session, and thank you.